We have 2 more matches remaining, both of which are deciders. Whoever wins advances to the next day. Whoever loses is out of the Mythic Invitational. We've seen these players battling their way through lowers throughout the day. Who will advance? It's time to find out. Our first competitor is the famous streamer known as TheAsianAvenger from the USA. Let's welcome David Nguyen. We've seen ESPER Control be very popular today. That was one of David's choices, but also bringing the ESPER ACUITY Dex Double Control. His opponent, who we just saw take down Quicksort in the last lower bracket match, from the Czech Republic, it's Ondřej Stráský. And as Ondřej said, a big fan of the ESPER Control mono white list. It's time to get the match underway. Good luck, have fun. Over to you, commentators.
Thank you so much, Sean. All right, Paul, let's take a look at these deck lists. In terms of what you want to see first. In the very first game, obviously, it is random. Which deck do we get? What do each player hope to see on the opposite side of the board?
Well, taking a look at David Nguyen's list, one of the decks that he submitted was kind of the traditional pure ESPER Control deck. And with the pure ESPER Control deck, that deck is a little bit, as you can see here, it's a little more suited to kind of be flexible. It's got decent game against most of the decks in the field. You have, of course, your Absorbs, your Teferis, and then, of course, the Toolboxy card in Mastermind's Acquisition. Of course, the AsianAvenger has a couple of extra tech cards up his sleeve with the 2 copies of Devious Cover-Up. Whenever the ESPER Mirror goes long, both players are exhausting their resources back and forth. And if you have the ability to use a Devious Cover-Up and, shuffle a Teferi and a couple of Absorbs back into your deck, that gives you a huge leg up. On top of that, if you can filter through and get 2 Devious Cover-Ups going, then you're never going to deck, as you're going to be able to use the Devious Cover-Ups to recycle each other.
Taking a look at the sideboard here, the toolbox that we have affectionately dubbed it. A whole lot of options for Krim, depending on what he needs in the specific matchups.
Yeah, and given how popular this ESPER Control deck has been, we've seen players go through almost all of these cards, actually. We've seen Mass Manipulation, we've seen Lyra Domberger, and we've even seen the Mirari Conjecture.
Taking a look at the the ESPER ACUITY list, with the key card being Dovan's Acuity. This has been working out pretty well for AsianAvenger, I'd say.
Yeah, and now this is the deck specifically tooled to beat aggressive decks. You have Dovan's Acuity. It's a source of card advantage that also gains your life. It's repeatable, but on top of that, you're playing 4 copies of Revitalize. This deck plays lots of at sorcery speed cards that you can fire off on your turn to be able to pick up that Dovan's Acuity. But with all that extra life gain that you have in your deck, it really helps shore up your mono-red matchup. However, you do lose percentage points to the pure ESPER Control decks because of the fact that you have all these life gain effects.
All right, the sideboard as well. Rocking some of the other cards we saw in the ESPER Control deck. Let's take a look now at Ondřej Stráský's mono-red aggro.
Yeah, and we've already seen this deck plenty of times. You have, of course, your 4 of all the best red cards in the format, and then a couple of extra cards here in the Legion Warboss and skewer the credits for Stráský. We saw Experimental Frenzy just kind of go off in some of these previous games, and that's the card that Stráský is going to want to lean on against these control matchups with access to all that life gain and all that removal.
Oh yeah. Taking a look at the ESPER Control matchup, not running any Devious Cover-Ups like the AsianAvenger is running. Do you think it gives AsianAvenger an edge at all, having those 2 cards available to him?
So one would normally think that that would be the case, but I think Stráský and Hain, when they tested and built this deck, they actually kind of went a little bit deeper. They were like, you know what, the most important card to get that leg up and get that Teferi onto play earlier is Chemister's Insight. And he's playing the full 4 copies of Chemister's Insight in the matchup, and I think that is actually the single most important card in the matchup in the mid-phase of the game. It allows you to recycle through all the bad removal spells you have in the matchup, and also just make sure that you never miss your land drop until turn 7 or 8 of the game.
Chemister's Insight, definitely one of the key cards in this matchup, especially when there are no creatures to kill. Now taking a look at the head-to-head, again, very experienced players, 2001 and 2006 starting respectively, and 20 Mythic championships for Ondřej Stráský. He is experienced.
Yeah, he has basically been playing on the Mythic Championship since he started playing. You know, there are always jokes about his retirement, but, you know, it's kind of a running joke within the competitive Magic community. He says he retires and then comes back in top 8's an event. He kind of said a similar thing and then, of course, makes it to top 8 of the arena ladder. And here we see him fighting for a slot into the top 4 of the Invitational.
It's that competitive nature. You just got to keep going. You got to know, maybe this time I'll get it.
Yeah.
Taking a look now at the opening hands. This is the AsianAvenger rocking the Doan's ACUITY, ESPER ACUITY. Pretty good hand there. And taking a look at Strasky's mono red.
And this
is a bit of a slower start here.
But this is exactly the matchup that AsianAvenger wanted. This is how he wanted the matchup to break down. He has the ESPER ACUITY deck going up against Strasky's mono red deck. This is what you want. You're playing Revitalize, you're playing Doan's ACUITY. You have all this life gain to negate all the burn spells in the mono red deck.
All right, kicking things off. Hallowed Fountain, 2 Mountains, and a Runaway Steamkin on the board. Revitalize now up and available for the AsianAvenger. And Strasky's just going to keep running out all of his cheap creatures, maybe getting some burn spells in there where he can.
Yeah.
Making this Runaway Steamkin as big as possible.
Strasky wants to get in for the maximum amount of damage. He's going to want to probably cast a spell here to make the Steamkin bigger, and then he can follow that up with a light up the stage after it gets in for damage, because the AsianAvenger does not have any 2-mana removal spells in his hand.
So the Runaway Steamkin growing, now a 3/3. Finding another light of the stage and a Fanatical Firebrand, both pretty good draws.
But he really wanted to find a land there. If he found a land, he would have been able to play a Gitu Lava Runner and attack for 4 with the Steamkin. Then if he wanted to put more pressure on the battlefield, he could have followed that up with a Goblin Chain Whirler.
Ooh. That would have been ideal, but unfortunately no 3rd mountain there. Doan's ACUITY now hitting the board, gaining life, drawing cards, 2 Kaya's Wraths in the hand of the AsianAvenger.
Yeah, so Strasky going to be firing off this Fanatical Firebrand. He's going to be wanting to cast that, get that Runaway Steamkin into a 4/4. But a lot of different options here, because keep in mind with Runaway Steamkin on the battlefield, with the once you get 3 counters onto it, you can choose to remove those 3 counters and cast that in for 3 red mana. So Strasky has the potential to kind of unload his hand, but of course, he does have to be mindful of the fact that he's playing against an ESPER control deck, and of course, he's got 3 mana on the battlefield. You know what that means? He's 1 mana away from casting a Kaya's Wrath.
Yep, and he knows that in the back of his mind. He's thinking, well, do I just pop off here and hope to get as much damage in as possible, knowing all my creatures are going to die? What is the best sequencing here? Do you keep a few creatures back, knowing that on turn 4, Kaya's Wrath is the most likely?
Yeah, he's definitely not going to want to necessarily overextend here. It's possible that he just runs out one of the Steamkins and passes, because this is enough of a board presence where if the AsianAvenger does have something like a Kaya's Wrath, he does need to fire it off.
Yeah. So Lightning Strike, Goblin Chain Whirler ×2, Gitu Lava Runner, and the Runaway Steamkin. Strasky will be able to rebuild his board, but the second Kaya's Wrath is in the AsianAvenger's hand. Let's see what he decides to do here. Contemplating, do I want to get that face Smorkin, or would I rather just hang back a bit here? Turn 4, it's ESPER. Things are going to die.
And I love the patience exhibited by Strasky here, because, you know, that's the thing. We here can see both of the hands face up, but one of the toughest things in this, just in Magic, is, of course, playing against a deck with sweepers, because you don't know. If you don't put on enough pressure, your opponents can simply just take a lot of the damage, and you don't want to get to the late game against this control deck. But if you overextend, then you get punished by cards like Kaya's Wrath. So, you know, really interesting spot there for Strasky, but choosing to put just that one additional threat in play.
Getting in for the 2 damage there with a Gitu Lava Runner. Everything dies yet again to the Kaya's Wrath, and Goblin Chain Whirler now hitting the board. Will probably get Vraska's Contempted, unless AsianAvenger decides to go dig it in that toolbox to find something.
No, I think AsianAvenger definitely wants to just get all the threats off the battlefield, preserve that life total. Next turn, he does have the ability to play Doan's ACUITY and Mastermind's Acquisition, or keep up that Devious cover-up that he has in hand.
All right, so Strasky, in essence, emptying his hand. No more cards. He is top decking. I bet he wishes he had found that Experimental Frenzy just to keep up with the card advantage here of the AsianAvenger.
Absolutely.
So now Krim has decisions to make. Mastermind's Acquisition, what are we digging for? Let's go take a look on the sideboard.
Yeah, let's take a look. Let's take a look at the Asian Avenger side of the battlefield here to see what he's looking through here with the Mastermind's acquisition. A lot of great cards. Lyra Dawnbringer, often the card that you want to get. This is fantastic against the mono-red aggressive deck. It plays defense, it gains you life, and on top of that, Strosky currently has no cards in hand, so he's going to need to actually find 2 burn spells to be able to deal with Lyra Dawnbringer.
Experimental Frenzy right on time. Welcome to the match.
Yeah, and we've seen the power of Experimental Frenzy, but the Asian Avenger actually has the answer here.
Yeah.
He has a Mortify in hand, and he's going to fire it off this turn.
Devin's Security returning to hand yet again. He's able to cost that. But Lyra Dawnbringer coming down. Defense has arrived.
Yeah, and this is... Strosky's in a really tough spot. He has to play Goblin Chain Whirler here first. If he does that, Lyra Dawnbringer will take 1 damage, and then the other Goblin Chain Whirler will attack, and because it has first strike, Strosky can then use the Fanatical Firebrand to finish off the Lyra Dawnbringer. Sure, it's a 2-for-1, but that's kind of worth it because you really need to get the Lyra Dawnbringer off the battlefield.
Would playing the Goblin Chain Whirler in the second main phase not possibly have been a slightly better way to ensure that the Asian Avenger would block here? He wants to block either way, right?
That is an option that would have also worked because he could have, again, attacked. Because both creatures had first strike, they would have traded, and then the same play could have occurred.
Yeah. So Devin's Acuity just gaining some more life there. No attacks from Strosky's side.
And now a second copy of Dovin's Acuity for the Asian Avenger with a Lyra Dawnbringer and Counter Magic in hand in that Devious cover-up.
Let's see how Strosky sequences this attack here. Fanatical Firebrand being a cheeky little goblin, able to just get that damage through. I'm guessing this Goblin Chain Whirler will get deviously covered up. Return some of the key cards back to the deck.
Yeah, he probably needs to use a counter spell here. However, there is some concern because, of course, now he is vulnerable to a top-decked Experimental Frenzy, and we've seen the power of that card before. So. But at the same time, he's in a position where he can't even attack with the Lyra Dawnbringer because he's losing that damage race. If he attacks for 5 and he gains 5, Andre Strasky can then attack back for 7 damage.
Oh, and then if it's a top deck, Lightning Strike, Skewer the Critics, anything like that, that is overs dovers. But let's see.
And this is pretty nice. He's going to play the fun of copy of the Immortal Sun. That will pump Lyra Dawnbringer up to a 6/6, but more importantly, it will draw the Asian Avenger an extra card every single turn.
Yes, would you like some extra cards, Asian Avenger? Yes, thank you. I would like that.
And the primary reason the Immortal Sun is in this deck is to shore up its worst matchup, which is Esper Control. And the Immortal Sun single-handedly gives you a card that shuts off all of your opponent's Teferis.
Oh, Experimental Frenzy now for Strosky. What does he find on top? It is a Legion War Boss. He's going to have to sit there and wait an extra turn before coming into play.
Things are getting kind of dicey. The Asian Avenger does need to find an answer to this Experimental Frenzy.
Kaya's Wrath, though. Kaya's Wrath will stave off this attack just a little bit.
Yeah, it's possible he wants to use the Kaya's Wrath this turn. If he does this, though, he will lose the Lyra Dawnbringer. Another thing he can consider is just casting a Cry of the Carnarium just to get that Fanatical Firebrand off the battlefield and then try to race Strosky. Because Strosky is currently on a two-turn clock. If the Asian Avenger just attacks twice with the Lyra Dawnbringer, he will be able to win. On top of that, he has a Devious cover-up here to protect
Let's see.
a flurry of burn spells. But here we go.
Let's
Experimental
see what this
Frenzy.
flurry is. Got the Get-To Lava Runner, followed up by a Wizard's Lightning. Does he go for Lyra Dawnbringer here?
But he needs to find a burn spell, and he has it.
Devious cover-up, though. When does Krim use this?
You will probably wait for the second burn spell because there's no real reason to counter the Wizard's Lightning. You have, because it's also not 100%. It's not super likely that you have back-to-back 3-damage burn spells. Sure, this deck plays a lot of those, but it also plays a lot of creatures. Of course, it has lands, additional frenzies. So, you might want to wait until you get, your opponent casts that second burn spell on the Lyra.
All right, so now the Devious cover-ups looping themselves, as you mentioned.
Because at this point, given that the Asian Avenger used the counter magic, it's possible Strasky is now just going to try to straight up race. So what he can try to do here now, attack with the creatures, and he has a really big choice as to what he should actually do with that Skewer the Critics on top of his deck.
He's got 11 damage going through at the moment, if my math is correct. That's quite substantial.
Yeah, so
here we go. First strike damage, Spectacle up.
See the chains of the spectacle. What
Hits
will he
lava
do
runner.
with the skewer of the crit? Now he's going to the face.
Oh, light at the stage. 2 shocks on top. Let's find out. It's an experimental frenzy.
That's just one of the cards, however. You get to see 2 cards, of course.
Oh, Viashina Pyromancer and the Viashina Pyromancer. Ooh, this is close.
And the Asian Avenger is now at 2 life.
Ooh-wee.
Look at this experimental frenzy go. And he does not find additional answers. He needs to play a Kaya's Wrath next turn.
Get the life, clear the board. All right, it's do or die now.
But
Creature's gone. Let's see what we get.
all right,
Land. Shock.
Just play it all. Keep going.
Just throw cards on the board and see what happens. Another land blocking the experimental frenzy.
So that is the one downside, of course. That's how you can slow down. If you find a sequence where there's multiple lands on top, then you will kind of have your turn shut off. However, now Strasky has the backup experimental frenzy, which is actually great because now, even if the Asian Avenger finds something like a Mortify, the fact that Andre Strasky has 2 on the battlefield, it makes it even harder to fight through these experimental frenzies.
2 lands in hand, that's not gonna help you, Krim. Experimental frenzy getting blocked by another mountain. Creatures getting in for just the 3. This is close. Both players on 2 life. This is about as close as it can get, friends.
Absolutely. And
oh no, another
the
land
Asian
off the
Avenger
top.
needs to find an answer here.
Oh no, another land off the top. No, that is not what you want to see.
Yeah, and a really unfortunate sequence of draw steps from the Asian Avenger. He needed to find an instant to be able to replay those Dovin's Acuities, but only found lands.
Relief. Look at the relief from Strasky. He knows just how close that match was. That was bonkers.
That game looked firmly in favor for the Asian Avenger. Keep in mind, he had so many opportunities there to find instants that he could play on his turn. But that's also the downside of playing something like Counter Magic with Dovin's Acuity, because of course, whenever you counter a spell, you won't actually be able to pick up the Dovin's Acuity, so he wasn't really able to take advantage of all the value that you can possibly get with that card.
Wow, what a game. So moving into game 2 now, we will see the ESPER Control versus the ESPER Control.
I think we might have seen this matchup once or twice.
I don't know about you. I don't recall it specifically, but
But I did get a chance to talk to Strasky and even Matt Nass, because he did get to play against Strasky at some point, and they were talking about how Strasky's list is likely slightly favored in the head-to-head matchup against kind of your more traditional stock Esper list, because he does have a little more counter magic and a little more card draw. And in matchups like this where the games go really long, those 1 or 2 additional relevant cards can go a long way.
All right, let's take a look shortly here at the opening hands. We are ready to rock and roll, both players. Think keeping. Let's see. Of course, all the shocklands coming in until turn 2, Thought Erasure. All right, let's take a look. What you got there? No, I don't want you looking at my hand. Thank you very much. Asian Avenger getting rid of the opposing Thought Erasure.
Yeah, but the Asian Avenger with multiple sweepers in hand and no 3rd mana source.
So Strasky bluffing a counter. Another Thought Erasure, taking a peek. Oh, what you got there? Thanks, I'll take that absorb.
And if you notice, the Asian Avenger playing Watery Grave untapped, because lands, your life is not really that important in this matchup, and he knows that Strasky plays 1 copy of Syncopate and wanted to play around that if he drew it that turn.
So paying for the life. It's almost like let's see how many times we can punch ourselves in the face here with our shocklands. Now, a decision to be made. Let me run out this Kaya and see if I can bait the absorb, because I want to go digging in my toolbox, which Strasky doesn't know about.
Yeah, but Kaya doesn't really do a whole lot at this early phase of the game. Sure, it's your ultimate win condition, but it doesn't draw you cards, it doesn't help smooth out your draw. So it's possible that Strasky lets this resolve, because he might want to keep Absorb up for a potential Teferi or a Mastermind's acquisition from the Asian Avenger. And he might also just want to fire off that Chemister's Insight in hand. I mean, Strasky with a fantastic opener here with multiple counterspells, Thought Erasure, and Chemister's Insight.
So Kaya does resolve and starts munching on the graveyard of Andre Strasky.
And I like this play. I like letting this Kaya resolve, because Chemister's Insight, you now have the opportunity here to find a Teferi and slam it here, while the Asian Avenger only has 1 mana up, so he does not have counter magic available.
So let's take a look now and see if Krim risks it for the biscuit. Kaya getting rid of that Chemist's Insight, which is, of course, a very, very vital card.
Yeah, and this is good sequencing from the Asian Avenger. Using the Kaya to force Andre Strasky to use the jumpstart on the Chemist's Insight, he now doesn't have access to counter magic, meaning that the Asian Avenger can now safely resolve Mastermind's acquisition for whatever card he thinks he needs for this matchup.
Very good play there. What is the Asian Avenger going for?
Yeah, we've seen lots of cards that people get for this specific matchup. Taking a look at the hand, we have, of course, Nezahal.
Unmoored Ego as well.
We have the Mirari Conjecture. A lot of different options here, and of course, also the Unmoored Ego.
I don't think we've seen Nezahal hit the board yet. But in the control matchup, you don't really want to play creatures.
Right.
Most of the time, they just end up dead.
But it does
guys.
dodge.
Oh, he's picked.
Oh, he's going for the Nezahal.
He's picked the big Elder Dino. We're gonna see Nezahal, perhaps.
Yeah, Nezahal not great against Kaya's Wrath specifically because, you know, sure you have a way to discard 3 cards and exile the Nezahal, but the Asian Avenger doesn't even have a lot of cards in hand. So, you know, if your opponent plays something like Vraska's Contempt into maybe another sweeper, that's it. Your Nezahal is gone.
Of course, Strasky does not know what Asian Avenger picked from the sideboard. What do you think is going through his mind? I'm pretty sure Nezahal isn't on the top of his list in terms of what did you fetch.
I think, you know, you have to kind of keep in mind all the different potential options there. That, of course, Nezahal being one of them, because the Asian Avenger knows that Strasky does have Absorb in hand. So if you want to get a threat, you want to get a threat that plays around the Absorb. And look, the Asian Avenger is slamming down Nezahal. Strasky currently doesn't have an answer for it.
Does have, no, this can't be countered. Right. So you play the Absorb, it won't do anything, but there's the Kaya's Wrath and no way to protect Nezahal, but he can. I'm not entirely sure how Nezahal works. So he can discard 2 cards to exile it.
He can discard 3 cards to protect it. However, what the Asian Avenger can do is wait, let the trigger resolve, draw the cards, then discard his hand to exile the Nezahal, and it will come back at the end of turn.
All right, that's pretty cool. So if you do have pointless creature removal spells in hand, Nezahal is a good way to get rid of them.
And Strasky, if he wants to cast Chemist's Insight, it might be in his best interest to cast it now, because once the Nezahal enters the battlefield, every time Strasky casts a spell, the Asian Avenger will be able to draw a card.
Okay. This is a pretty cool card. I like it.
We might see a Nezahal victory here if Strasky doesn't find an answer, but he does. A very, very clutch Mortify off the top for Strasky. If he uses a Mortify onto Nezahal, now the Asian Avenger doesn't have enough cards to protect the Nezahal unless he finds a counter spell in response to the trigger on the Mortify from the Nezahal activation, or sorry, the trigger here.
Yeah, let's see what Nezahal finds. It's an Isolated Chapel. That's not going to do it. Goodbye, big Dino. Into the bin you go. There's the Chemist's Insight that may have saved the Dino. Strasky now getting rid of the cost down, drawing 2 more cards in response. Seems like Asian Avenger will be playing his own Chemisters. Let's see what we got. Some good draws there. Absorb, Vraska's Contempt. Ooh, Search for Azcanta off the top there for Strasky. Thought Erasure, I want to take a peek in your hand, please, may I? And Asian Avenger says, nope, not today.
However, now the coast is clear to resolve the Search for Azcanta. The Asian Avenger only has 2 cards in hand, and Strasky has an Absorb to protect that Search for Azcanta.
This could be big.
And here, I mean, you can really see the value of playing the full 4 copies of Chemist's Insight in this matchup. Strasky just having access to so many more copies of this card, just drawing so many more cards over the course of the game, because the Asian Avenger only plays 2 copies of Chemist's Insight in his Esper control deck.
So definitely card draw king in this matchup so far. Strasky has multiple options, several things that he can do. Search for Azcanta, can hit the board and be relatively safe because Krim doesn't have an answer to it.
Yeah, Strasky has a lot of great options here. You know, he can use Chemist's Insight. He can also just safely resolve Mastermind's acquisition here and get something like maybe an Unmoored Ego, naming Teferi, Hero of Dominaria.
Here we go. Teferi.
That will shut down one of the primary card advantage engines of the Esper control deck. By removing the 3 copies of Teferi, Hero of Dominaria, the Asian Avenger only has access to Search for Azcanta, and he's got to hope to resolve it and then flip it to actually have a way to draw additional cards every turn.
Strasky before picking 3 copies of Teferi, taking a look through the deck just to remind himself, all right, what have we seen? What is still to come?
So now the Asian Avenger's primary win condition is to continue looping devious cover-ups. That is his only way to win because he already cast his Mastermind's Acquisition.
Yep.
And it looks like he's only playing 1 copy of it in his entire deck. So he cannot draw another Mastermind's Acquisition unless he cycles it with the devious cover-up.
Let's see if we get to that. Andre Strasky already being in a pretty critical match, going down to decking between himself and his ESPER control matchup earlier today.
But the Asian Avenger does have the answer for Search for Azcanta. Not only does he have Mortify, but he has Negate to go up against the Absorb in Andre Strasky's hand.
That's pretty big. I think we'll see it fired off here.
Strasky should try to protect this with the Absorb because an unchecked Search for Azcanta is one of the primary ways to kind of pull ahead in this control matchup.
All right, a whole bunch of nope on the stack there.
And Strasky going, okay,
in the bin.
Okay, not bad. He gave the little smirk there. He's like, okay, okay. But again, the key card to the matchup here, 2 more copies of Chemister's Insight in Strasky's graveyard, and he has yet to play a Teferi, Hero of Dominaria.
Yeah, he's digging for it, and he'll find it a heck of a lot quicker.
Yeah, he's gone through over half his deck at this point.
Syncopate, Isolated Chapel coming at the top there. Thought Erasure won't help him much at this point.
But if you noticed, Strasky not running out the Thought Erasure yet, I think he might want to wait until he draws something like a Teferi. But oh, okay, no, never mind. He's looking to fire it off. And it still pays off, right? And there it is. There's the Teferi, Hero of Dominaria on top. He wants to use it. He got the Vraska's Contempt, which was the answer to the Teferi that he's going to draw.
All right, so now Strasky does have protection for the Teferi, and the Syncopate has to just make Asian Avenger spend all of his mana.
Ooh, but the Asian Avenger top decks Devious Cover-Up as a way to counter Teferi and recycle that Mastermind's Acquisition. However, Strasky does have a Syncopate, and it's 4 enough. Strasky has potentially a Syncopate for 8 mana, and it looks like the Asian Avenger only has 6 mana up. So this Syncopate actually will be able to counter this Devious Cover-Up. Strasky just making sure you gotta count. This is an extremely important turn here. Remember, the winner of this match makes it into the top 4 of the Invitational for a chance to win $250,000.
That is big bucks. So the players are trying their best. They are in try-hard mode. They don't want to give this up. Teferi resolves, and he's gonna start ticking up. Asian Avenger needs to find something off the top of the deck. Strasky getting a Teferi in reserve. Cast Down and Cry are not going to help the Asian Avenger.
Yeah, and now Strasky firmly in the lead. Remember, the Asian Avenger has 0 copies of Teferi, Hero of Dominaria left in his deck as Strasky used Mastermind's Acquisition, getting Unmoored Ego to remove all those copies.
That is correct. No Teferi for the Asian Avenger. Teferi is now going to potentially run away with it unless the Asian Avenger can find something.
Yeah, and the thing is, even an answer won't do it because Strasky has backup copies of Teferi. Two backup copies even
well, he has gone through most of his deck.
Right, exactly. He was basically they're all just kind of grouping together and he drew them all at once.
So now we need to just see an emblem from Andre Strasky start blowing up lands, prevent Asian Avenger from, Vraska's Contempt.
Oh, and that was actually a very key draw here. The Asian Avenger now going to go for Vraska's Contempt on Strasky's upkeep in case he has Counterspell, but that does prevent the emblem.
All right.
So he now needs to find more answers for the 2 Teferis that are still in Strasky's hand.
You got any more of them Vraska's Contempts? Let's find out. I believe he's only playing the 1 copy of that.
The Asian Avenger plays 3 copies of Vraska's Contempt. So he cast 1 earlier, and another copy was Thought Erasured earlier, a few turns prior.
Okay. It's getting a little nerve-wracking here. I looked at his life total. I'm like, how are you down to 9 life already? And then I remembered, oh yes, because you've been shocking yourself with the land.
Right. At this point, there are so many lands on the battlefield, you no longer need to put those lands into play untapped. But early on, it's all about jockeying for position, bluffing counter magic, even if you don't have it, just to make it so that your opponent just doesn't slam a Teferi Hero of Dominaria on turn 5.
All right. As Kanta is now flipped. Stratsky digging through what's left of his deck. Just needs to be careful not to deck himself here. Only 10 cards left.
Right, but keep in mind...
Does have the Teferi, though, to keep tucking itself back into the library.
Yes, Teferi has the ability to use the -3 ability on itself, meaning that if you have Teferi going, you will not actually be able to deck. And that's kind of, I want to say, outside of Kaya, of course, it is the other primary win condition for this Esper control deck, where you get the Teferi emblem. You don't even necessarily need to sometimes, because it has so much card draw, you can just answer all of your opponent's threats, and then ultimately your opponents will run out of resources, run out of cards in their library, and lose the game.
All right, Stratsky taking another peek in the library. There's the Kaya. Another negate Thought Erasure, and the final copy of Teferi. So now the Teferi on top. He certainly has an excess of Teferis.
Right. And
this is what AsianAvenger doesn't want to see.
Yeah, and at this point, he's just looking to get to Teferi -8, get that Teferi emblem going, start blowing up all of the AsianAvenger's lands. But at this point, he basically has this game locked up. He's just been so far ahead on cards throughout the course of the game with all of those Chemister's Insights. And now he has multiple copies of Negate to protect that Teferi and the Absorb here. So 3 cards to protect Teferi Hero of Dominaria. And then, of course, at some point, he's going to be able to draw into that Kaya and finish the game that way, or just ultimately run the AsianAvenger out of cards.
Taking another look with the Azcanta, the Sunken Ruin. What do we find? Cast Down and Cry. That's not going to help me.
And look at this. Stratsky had the option of picking up one of those removal spells, but he knows he's already got too many cards in hand, and he's going to be discarding them anyway, so he just wants to keep his library a little more full to give him a little more flexibility over the next few turns.
So we should see a Teferi emblem next turn, and then the subsequent Teferi is just tucking themselves back into the library, making sure Stratsky doesn't deck. Taking a look in the AsianAvenger's graveyard, making sure how many potential threats he has seen.
And that is a common thing that you will see in the kind of the late phases of the Esper Control matchup, in the Esper Control mirror, where you basically know each other's decks, and you're just counting, okay, how many negates are gone? How many Vraska's Contempts? How many absorbs? Okay, these are the things that I need to be concerned about, especially when you're in such a commanding position like Andre Stratsky, where he's just at this point got this game locked up.
Opting not to do the -3 there. Does he want to draw another card? Oh, he sees the Kaya. So he's getting very, very close to decking there, but he does have another turn or two just to make sure gets his Teferi in there. Kaya hitting the board now. Perhaps he wants to get this game over and done with in style.
Yeah, and look at this. Kaya able to slowly finish out the game once it gets to high enough loyalty, but at this point, multiple ways to win for Stratsky. He basically has this game completely locked up.
AsianAvenger is just sitting there scratching his head. Unfortunately, not finding any of his answers. No, it's just going through the motions here, I think.
Targeting all of the blue sources, as of course, blue mana is the strongest form of mana.
Now he'll get to take a peek. This is the first time he's gotten to have a peek in his hand, I believe. And you can see, that hand's not going to help you much, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Kaya just digging through the graveyard.
That's going to be very effective against creature decks, but not so much this matchup. Meanwhile, Stratsky's hand. If you draw Search for Azcanta, I can answer that. If you have Vraska's Contempt, I can answer that. And at this point, now we are going to start to seeing Teferi tuck itself, meaning that it will be impossible for Andre Stratsky to actually deck himself, as he will just continue drawing Teferi turn over turn. He's got that emblem in play. At some point, eventually, the AsianAvenger will have no permanence on the battlefield. And of course, this Kaya is also going to get pretty close to be able to just getting in for the final few points of damage.
Just to wrap it up, he does find the Devious cover-up, but with 2 negates and an absorb, I'm pretty sure that card is not going to resolve.
And Strasky is well aware of the devious cover-ups.
Yeah.
He knows that the Asian Avenger's already cast one, and at this point, what the Asian Avenger needs to do, it's not going to work, but what he needs to do is play out Cry of the Carnarium or Kaya's Wrath,
Yeah.
and with that ability on the stack, counter his own spell with devious cover-up and try to shuffle a bunch of threats back into his deck.
All right. Let's see if that happens. We have seen the Asian Avenger targeting his own Dovin's Acuity before, so he is no stranger to targeting or countering his own stuff. Again, another Teferi coming down. Attempting the devious
look at the Asian Avenger. He's like, this is probably going to resolve, right?
Yeah, sure.
Maybe you just don't do it.
He's just got 6 cards in hand, and one of them I can see as a negate, so it's fine. This is fine. No. Ooh, look at all those cards.
He's just thinking, wait, like, is this how I actually lose, or?
Is letting it resolve?
Interesting.
Oh. Nope. Nope. Yes, nope, nope. Nah. Not today. There we go.
Yeah, this makes a lot of sense. You want to be able to protect that Teferi here.
Hold that thought.
Was that 1 card? No, 2 cards.
So he's got an additional Teferi there
All right.
for extra protection. Kaya continuing to eat away at the Asian Avenger's graveyard.
Yep.
Of course, Kaya's ultimate being a -5. You get to drain your opponent
16.
equal. Ooh, that's a lot of damage. So we are very close.
Owie.
Once Strasky exiles 22 cards from the Asian Avenger's graveyard, Kaya will ultimate and deal 22 points of damage. And also gain Strasky 22 life. 19, very close.
When left unchecked, Kaya is she's a little crazy.
Yeah. Of course, Kaya just kind of a formality.
Yeah.
Because, of course, Strasky could have just won with this Teferi, but
Yeah.
the Kaya is kind of like the mercy rule.
Yeah,
It's like,
yeah.
hey, look, I'll make it a little bit faster
Yeah,
for
yeah,
you. Here you go, it's coming.
Just, you know, one shot you to the face for 22. Why not? Negate. Nope, don't take a look at my hand, thank you very much. Unfortunately, no hand disruption there for the Asian Avenger. Sitting there doing the mental math, going, all right, what do I need to do here to actually have a chance? Another thing in the bin, 21-21. There it comes.
This is
-5.
a 21-point damage ultimate.
Boom. There the Asian Avenger goes. Andre Strasky is the 3rd of our top 4. He will be playing tomorrow for his share of $1 million in prize monies. That's a nice chunk of change.
Absolutely, and I guess Strasky is not retired.
No, he's
going to
not
keep
retired.
on playing. He's going to be playing tomorrow for a chance to win $250,000. And, you know, I just want to kind of go back to that first game. I think that was the really important game for
so
Strasky.
close.
Of course, every game is important, but being able to kind of break serve in an unfavorable matchup, you're playing against a deck that plays Revitalize.
Yeah.
Counter your Lightning Strike, draw a card is basically what and he had Lyra Dawnbringer going, multiple Dovin's Acuity, but Experimental Frenzy is all it takes to be able to power through all of those cards.
It's a reason so many of the red decks run that enchantment. Definitely can go absolutely ham when it doesn't find another land, or of course itself, again, in the library. It doesn't behave all that well.
Yeah.
Every time I tried it, it just doesn't work for me.
Yeah, and then kind of going into that second game, this is kind of what was expected. Of course, even in the Esper control matchup, it largely comes down to who draws more relevant cards. And Strasky already tooled his deck to have a few more relevant cards, and of course playing the full 4 copies of what he believes to be the most important card in the matchup, which is Chemist's Insight.
All right, let's throw it up to Becca to hear from the not retired yet, Andre Strasky.